In Scotland, we only make two kinds of whiskey. We make malt whiskey and we make grain whiskey. That's it. If you mix those two together in any number, you get blended Scotch whiskey. That's Dewar's, Johnnie Walker, Chivas Regal, J&B, and 100 other blended brands. 90% of the market by volume, more or less, is still made up by that. Malt, grain, mixed, blended Scotch. If you take two grain whiskies and mix them together, you get blended grain. On their own, it's a single grain. The single doesn't refer to the grain in any way at all. It's talking about a single geographical location. Malt whiskey, single geographical location from one distillery, is single malt. Mix them together and you get what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll see you in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another nice, wee, quiet Thursday night. I hope you're all doing very, very well. It's wonderful to see this orange lighting up for me as I go live. Everybody saying hello. I'll do my very, very, very best to catch you tonight. No guest tonight, just me to talk about this wee topic that I find curious. That's what we always talk about here, things that I find curious. Yes, so blended malt, obviously, is what I was getting to in the intro there. If you take two if you take two single malts and you mix them together, or any number of single malts, honestly, you end up with a blended malt. That's different from a blended Scotch whiskey, even though they both have that dreaded B word there, as some people in the industry refer to it, and I can understand why. It's different. Blended Scotch and blended malt are two different things. Blended Scotch has a grain component in there as well. So that's made from lots of other grains other than malted barleys, likes of corn. More commonly in Scotland, it would be wheat, through a continuous still, a column still, a coffee still. Whereas malted, single malt, is obviously, it simply clues in the name, malt. It's made from 100% malted barley, and it's made in a traditional pot still. So whereas a continuous still can just run continuously, a pot still has to be made in batches. We're not going to talk too much about single malts tonight. We're going to be talking about what happens when we mix single malts to make a blended malt and why would you do such a thing. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated Barflies. Let's get back to that orange, where it was all very, very orange. Whiskey with Molly. Ben, good to see you, my friend. Tom Elmer, thank you very, very much for supporting on Dramface, Tom, and sending in your Dramface. You'll see that appearing over the next couple of weeks. Lee Haddington Whiskey, good to see you. Lee, Malt Brother Ray, good to see you. Ray, Rico Denert. Rico, my friend, I hope you're doing very, very well. Petehead Frank is in. Chris Pollack, Arnie Tiger, Captain. Captain, I wish you would maybe phonetically tell me if it's Bamus or Bamus. Tell me which it is, or somewhere in between the two. Good to welcome you. Ian Bose is here. Good to see you, Ian. Bruno Martins, fantastic. Richard Hall, Jerry Miller, Hellswood. Good to see you, Helen. Richard is saying, evening, Roy. Just nestled down for the vPub with a 15-year-old blend from Dark Sky Spirits of Moffat with an imminent opening of its own distillery. Aye, another new distillery down in the Borders. Yes, absolutely, Richard. I wonder how you're getting on with that wee blend. Ryan Sutherland is saying, evening, Roy and the Barflies, and Rob Halford's in as well. Rob, good to see you, buddy. It's nice to welcome you into the vPub. I hope you're doing well, my friend. Sugar Kitty is here. Fantastic to see you. Daniel Williams, Gabriel Wilding, Max Kreitner, Graham Young, Mark Lambert, Mike Johnson, Stefan Novak. Fantastic. Stefan, I wonder if you're going to Limburg. I'll talk about Limburg a wee bit later. I just booked up my flights and hotel today. Peter Box, fantastic Peter, Andrew Pierce, Gino Kumo, Chuck Maltminion, fantastic Al, Dave Cummins. Dave, how are you keeping, my friend? I hope you're doing very well. Gordon Fraser, Whiskey Games, Matt Bishop, good to see you. Matt, Mark, Time for a Dram, that's my friend Gregor in Portland. Fantastic, Gregor, good to see you, buddy. Jimmy Jazz, superb Jimmy, good to see you, my friend. Seb K, Whiskey 101. Bruno Martins, I think I got you. So many of you in. And Scotty S is in as well. Scotty up in Speyside. Good to welcome you to the vPub, Scotty. I hope you're doing well too. David Owen, Tom Scaramouche, Drew from Arizona. Listen, so many of you. How are we doing? We're well over 200, just a couple of minutes in. Yes, I think the crux of the blended malt discussion, you know, if we've got excited about whiskey and come into whiskey in recent years, it's all about single malts, isn't it? Single malt, single malt, single malt. We need to keep reminding ourselves that single malts, as this kind of boom sector of the market that everybody's interested in right now, is only a few decades old, really. There's always been single malts available, but typically the thing that brought Scotch whisky to the global market was absolutely blends. It was blends, something that they could marry together and mix together in order to make something of a consistent product that could meet expectations time and time again, iron out some of the batch variations that would come from especially single malt whiskey. And you could put a brand on it and sell it as a brand, and people would come to understand what that brand would taste like. Single malts came along a lot later. Single malts really started to gain popularity in the late 80s and into the 1990s. And it's really just been an upward incline. Since then, it's been growth, growth, growth. It's crazy what we have available just now. It's really difficult, even for geeks like myself, to keep up. So that's quite a contrast there, isn't it? You've got blends, blended Scotch whisky with mixed malts in there and grain, potentially mixed grains. And then you've got something that's a single definition, a very, very laser-focused kind of flavour profile from just one distillery, one style of whiskey, malt whiskey from one location, a single malt whiskey. So it's really quite removed from blends. So if you look at the other categories, and then you think about malt whiskey, and you have blended malts where malts are mixed together without the grain component, it's a blended malt. Kind of makes sense if you look at it from that perspective. But a lot of people will say, why would you blend malts? Why would you take a single malt, especially with the kudos that surrounds a single malt today? Why would you mix that with other single malts and sell it as a blended malt? That's kind of what we're going to touch upon tonight. We're going to talk about that, why you would. We're going to talk about the value proposition. Everything about the vPub throughout this year has to be very much value focused, of course. We're really all feeling the pinch. The prices are climbing up, not for everything, not all the time, but for a lot of products. And it makes us nervous about the things that aren't. Like, when are they going to start to increase? So it's always nice to kind of stay, have a bit of a wider vision, let's say, and be scanning the horizon for where the value is going to come from. Because we're not just talking about the value as in, I know what that is and I know what it's worth, and therefore that's a good price. I'm talking about value where there's a new thing, let's taste it and decide if it's a good price. Staying open-minded as possible. Because if we are honestly all about flavour and whiskey, so much less of it should be focused on where it's from and the specs on paper, and so much more of it should be about how it affects us, how we enjoy it, the engagement that we get from it. I noticed a wee Barfly post coming up there. Lee J. Brown, member for 24 months, 2 years' time well spent. Cheers, Roy and the Barflies. Lee J, I'm so grateful for your support, my friend. Your gold Barfly is going to turn a different colour very, very soon. And I appreciate the support. Lee J, thank you very much, my friend. Cheers. I predict 2022 will be the year that I get to meet Lee J. Brown down in Wiltshire. Men was saying, Douglas Lang summed it up nicely, Roy. A single malt is a beautiful violin, and a blended malt is getting the full orchestra. Listen, there's a lot of truth, and you can use analogies like that, and they work quite well. I think that the worry is that some of the single malts to make a blended malt is a screechy violin, and it's not made it in its own right. It's not made it as a single cast bottling, therefore it gets put to the side. We'll blend that out. And then eventually you think, oh, well, let's make a wee blended malt. We've got a few Islays, or we've got a few similar age statements here, or we've got a few this, that. Maybe these will work well together. And they do that. So it's blending away lesser quality, or that's the suspicion at least behind it. I'm going to just turn my fan on here. I hope you don't mind. It gets a wee bit warm in here under all of these lights. So there's that cynicism that hangs around the blended thing, right? Why would you blend away malts? There was a really good vPub a couple of years ago with Stuart Baxter from Douglas Lane, interestingly, Menno, and Stuart talked at length about this and why they exist. And Stuart isn't at Douglas Lane anymore. He's moved on to Inver House. But back when he was at Douglas Lane and responsible for remarkable regional malts like Big Pete, Timorous Beastie, Scallywag, Galdrons, Epicurean, Rock Island, I think I've managed to name them all there. He was able to talk about the concept of blended malts and why they would do it. And I found it to be a very, very interesting discussion. Nigel Beale is in. Fantastic, Nigel. Good to see you. Graham Fraser is saying, I was at a tasting with Ian Croucher from North Star last week. Always assumed independent bottlers blended their own blends, so was surprised to hear he buys blended malts already blended. Absolutely, especially with Ian Croucher, he's on record. I disagree with the statement that he said, by the way. He said that he's not very good in terms of his palate and things like that, and he's not very good at blending whiskies, so he doesn't trust himself to do that. He would rather buy in something that's already been blended by someone who's, and that makes a lot of sense, somebody who's got a lot of expertise and experience there. But anytime that you enjoy whiskies from North Star, I would say that he's either got wonderful connections or he's got actually a very good palate. But that's absolutely right. There's a lot of blended malt stock already out there on the market. It comes about in lots of different ways. It can happen that something gets vatted on a pretty large scale for a future project. And sometimes that project goes ahead and sometimes it doesn't. And you end up with all of this stock that's been recast from that vatting in order to bring on the maturation. Famously, I think one of the ones that you'll be most familiar with is Glen Scotia's Victoriana. That's actually a huge vatting that then gets recast into heavily charred casks for, I think, Michael Henry may be watching tonight and cringing as I say this, but I think it's 18 months further maturation after it's been vatted. Now, we're not talking about different malts with Glen Scotia. It's all from the same distillery, but it's from different casks. Almost everything you drink is blended. That's the truth of it. Almost everything. Blended is not the right word. Married, vatted, mixed, but blended. Almost everything that you drink. In fact, unless you pick something up and you know that it's a single cask, that is whiskey that's been filled into a cask and then the bottles have been filled from that cask. Everything else is vatted. I've got a bottle of North Star here just in front of me. This is a 10-year-old Ben Rinnes. This is actually the Good Spirits Company's Ben Rinnes. I managed to get 2 of these. It's a fantastic Ben Rinnes. I don't know why it's not focusing, but I will hold it up until it does. This is a cracking single cask whiskey. And it tells us that it's a single cask on it, not by using the statement, in this case, single cask, but it tells us that it's one of 626 bottles. So we know that that was the yield. That immediately gives us a clue that it's quite a big cask here. 626 bottles. You're thinking that it's going to be something on the lines of a big sherry butt, something like that. So if you look around, it tells you here it's cask series 15, and it tells you on the side that it is bottled from a refill butt. So this is a single cask. Now, interestingly, we don't know if the Ben Rinnes spent its entire life in that refill butt. We don't know if it's maybe a couple of hoggies that's been vatted together and put into a refill butt for an unspecified amount of time. That's an interesting story for another time, another topic. Minimum times and all of this stuff, it doesn't really exist. It's not defined. However, at point of filling these bottles, these bottles were filled from a refill butt. So that means that it's a refill butt that's been built probably for sherry, or it's been built and seasoned with sherry. But long after it's been seasoned with sherry, it's matured some whiskey at some point, and it's on at least its second filling here. It could be its third, but more likely its second filling, and then it becomes a refill. So the previous incumbent was not sherry. The previous incumbent was whiskey. Whiskey Throttle is saying, I'm a Scot. I'm in A Scotch beehive. What does that mean, Daniel? It's spending more because of you. Ah, okay, okay. Listen, Daniel, I've seen your collection, buddy. You did not need any encouragement from me or anybody else to be spending money on your favourite drink. Let's be honest with you, buddy. It's good to welcome you in, and I hope that you and your collection is doing very, very well. So that's probably the most defined. This is single malt whiskey, of course, and it's a single cask, single malt. So it's about as surgical, it's about as laser focused you can get. Then if we pick up, I don't know, I'm looking for a single malt now, and I don't have a single malt around. Do I have a single malt here? Look over my shoulders. Any of the single malts that you see, the vast majority of them, unless they're a single cask, of course, are going to be a marriage of casks. They're going to be multiple casks brought together to match the scale of the desired vatting. And then those casks are matched up in order to bring the flavour profile for that vatting, for that eventual bottling. So when you buy a single malt and it says single malt Scotch whisky on the bottle, it's already blended. Now, it's not blended as in blended from different sources. It's blended from the same distillery stock. It's a single malt, but it's multiple casks that make that up. And the casks are brought together by flavour, by a blender. That's the skill. That's the skill that they have. And the idea is that they're either trying to match a very specific predefined profile, or they're trying to match consistency. They're trying to have the next batch go out to be the same as the previous batch. Because in whiskey, people don't really understand that idea that it's single malt whiskey that's going to potentially be different cask to cask and batch to batch. So they're really trying to they're trying to get the scale and the vattings as consistent as possible, so that when they brand that, the bottle that you buy today is going to taste the same as the bottle that you've bought before. It's a big challenge. Consistency is a difficult thing to achieve in malt whiskey. It really is. Penny in the Slot is here. I was about to say water, water everywhere. Of course, they do. If you see anything below other than cask strength, there's water added to bring it to its desired bottling strength. Typically, the mass market product would be 43%. Enthusiasts tend to want it to be 46 or higher, because then that assumes that they can consider not using chill filtration to strip out oils and things that cloud at lower ABV. So yes, there's usually water, usually demineralized water, used to bring it down to bottling strength. Whiskey Games Matthew saying an age statement is likely to be a blend of aged whiskey from many casks. So maybe if distilleries, oops, sorry Matt, just as it disappeared. So maybe if distilleries are more transparent about that, then people would love blends more. It's kind of the thing that there is a kind of, if there's a zeitgeist around single malt and kudos around single malt, and blends are seen as the kind of legacy product, I think that blended malt sits somewhere in between and probably closer to blends. It's not really, up until recent years, it's not really had a lot of kind of zeitgeist about it. It's not had a lot of people, because they're saying, no, I want to try single malts because I can taste that distillery character and I can taste the differences in all the distilleries. It's a very old-fashioned way of thinking. Any distillery that's been built recently, with very few exceptions, have the ability to switch up and change what they produce. Changing their mash, changing their fermentation, their yeast or their fermentation times, changing their distillation regime, changing the cut points. They can actively change the style of spirit that they make. And think of the huge scale distilleries like Roseisle and Ailsa Bay. They can make any whiskey that you want. New distilleries, very small scale distilleries like Ardnamurchan, consider all the variations that can come out of a place like Loch Lomond. Even if there is a distillery out there that's making the same product or making the same spirit most of the time, by the time it's maturing, they're trying to switch it up, and they're adding in different casks and finishes and things to bring variety to that flavour profile. So the idea that whiskey should taste the same each time from a single distillery at a certain age point is kind of really old-fashioned. That goes back to the days when a blender needed to rely on a very specific component to make up his blend, and he needed that distillery to be as consistent as possible. It's also why we see sister distilleries opening up next to each other. Famously, a great example would be a Glenlossie and a Manachmore right next to each other, trying to make very, very similar spirit styles to fill blends. Blended malts are actually much more modern in every respect, except for that clunky name. And also our mindset, the way that we consider blended malts. Let's imagine a blender is trying to make really the best whiskey he can make, and all he's got is casks from one distillery. Imagine suddenly that he's got much more casks from more distilleries. That makes sense that a blended malt should then be potentially better than a lot of single malts a lot of the time. Theoretically, it could be that old cliche that we like to talk about, but it does make sense, better than some of its parts. Then people wouldn't be speaking about blended malts in such kind of derogatory tones, or not really being very, very interested in them. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, because actually the days of blended malts being cheaper than single malts is kind of disappearing now. They're very, very close. They're on par. Some are even a wee bit more expensive. The reason I'm talking about blended malts tonight is that I do believe that there are still some good value products out there, but even the ones that are on a par in terms of price point, I believe they bring something different. And if you're into it for the flavour, if you love whiskey more than anything for that impact of flavour, which is very much what I enjoy, blended malts can deliver that. They really, really can. I've got a lot of examples to share with you tonight. Tonight's going to be one of those wee uncorking sessions. I'm going to have a bit of fun. I've been stashing bottles with a view to doing a blended malt vPub for a long time, and I've just recently bought a couple more. So I want to share them all with you tonight. There will be a lot of uncorking getting done, so there's not going to be any reviews. It's going to be the same as maybe the Ignored series or Value series or Rising Stars, one of those things where we just kind of do some uncorking and try and explore what's available at what price point. Malt Brother Ray is saying, you know where a single malt is made and what to expect. With a blended malt, the provenance is lost, and just reading the label does not tell you what to expect. If you go to a whiskey from, the one I held up there was Ben Rinnes, that's a good example. You've got a preconceived idea what Ben Rinnes, what the profile is going to be like. But let me tell you, Ray, I've had dozens and dozens of Ben Rinnes over the years, and very rarely do they conform to a tight profile. I would say the only thing that holds them together is Ben Rinnes can often have a good weight. It's often got a good body about it, in my experience, but not much more than that. There are distilleries out there that are exceptions, like Springbank, like Ben Nevis, Clynelish, a few others where you can say, okay, there is something that I expect from that bottling, but it doesn't always deliver it. And often the best Clynelish I've ever tasted has been out of a bottle where it's been mixed with something else. Not all the time. But when I taste Clynelish out of a blended malt, it's almost always fantastic. So I understand where you're coming from, but that's the kind of thinking that we need to try and help change a bit, because that is true up until it's not. Penny in the Slot is saying, I'm finding that a few of my recent purchases have been blends for a number of reasons, and something like Cadenhead's 7 Stars blend can offer a superior dram without breaking the bank. Absolutely. I don't have a 7 Stars. I've never had a 7 Stars, but I know that a lot of people rave about it. I know it's supposed to be really flavorful and really good value. It's maybe about time that I get a hold of that one. Absolutely. Dave Swift is saying, if I'm in a shop and I can't help but feel blends are inferior. I know they're not, but the psychology will always have me reaching for a single malt. Dave, I encourage you, I encourage Ray, and I encourage anybody with the same feelings. Challenge yourself. Blind tasting. I know I go on and on and on. I bang on about blind tasting all the time. Here Roy goes again about his blind tasting. I'm telling you now, have a little flight for yourself. Pour 5 whiskies. Similar price, similar age, similar theme, similar profile, whatever it is you want to do. And pour 2 in there that are blended malts. I mean, make sure the quality is on par, whatever. And mix them around, get somebody to pour them for you, and then just sit with them. Do not play a guessing game of trying to guess which is which. Let yourself go and just taste the whiskey, not knowing what it is. Make notes. Try and articulate what you're tasting. The experience. Are you enjoying it? Is this good? Score them. Stars, 5 stars, points out of 10. Use a 100-point scale, whatever you want to do. Score them and make notes. And after you've gone through the flight of 5, go back again and do it again. It will teach you in time that blended malts are a real proposition. If you're drinking blended malts that do use casks that quite potentially haven't made their case for a single cask bottling. Now that's only going to happen at independent bottlers, of course. And they're brought together in order to make something that's better than their individual single cask. That's only a good thing. There's nothing wrong about a cask that hasn't quite ended up as good as a sister cask or another cask in the same parcel. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's absolutely expected, and it's just the nature of it. So one of them goes off for it to be a single cask. Maybe sometimes they vat them together and make a small batch release instead of a single cask. That happens. So what's the difference between doing that and then taking that one that's a bit lesser and saying this is going to be a really good component in a blended malt, where you take in some of the things that's missing from that, or some things that can add to that, and that cask is able to add to those things too, and you end up with something that's really creative if you consider it. I found a blended malt, says Matthias Mulder. Good to see Matthias. He's saying called 3D. That's Dufton, Dulwyn, and Dulwinnie. It even came with 3 glasses. So now waiting for the vPub to be streamed in 3D. That's not happening. It's not happening, Matthias, but it's good to see you in. I've got a blended malt in my glass right now, and nobody's ever going to say that this is anything other than a really good whiskey. And I'll go one further than that. This is not a blended malt that's trying to balance out and be everything to everybody. This is just a very specific style, very specific profile, done very, very well. Is it consistent? It's not far off. It's really not far off. I don't notice too much inconsistency with this bottling, and I've had a few over the years. It's rich, and it's sweet, and it's easy. There's a hint of acidic in there, a hint of bitterness as well. There's a nice long finish on it, and the finish is all about the spice. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've talked about this often on the vPub. I tend to always have a bottle of this on hand. It's Compass Box's Spice Tree. It's less than £50, sometimes £40 of that order, 46% ABV. And famously, to get around using they were banned from using the inner staves. It's not allowed under Scotch whisky production practices. So instead of using inner staves, they use French oak toasted barrel heads. So that's how they get the French oak, the European oak element into this. Adds a bit of spice and a bit of flavour to it that goes along nicely with the American oak barrels. This is a fantastic whiskey, and I think I've never come across anybody to say, "Oh, Spice Tree, that was terrible." I have never encountered that in my life. Let me give you another example. The one I wanted to start tonight with. I reached for the bottle and it wasn't there. And then I looked down in the pile for the recycled reviews and it's there. This is so good that it's so easy just to tear through. You can use it as a mixer, of course. You can make a nice highball with it or anything, but I was loving this neat. If you like your whiskey to be fruity, if you like it to be fresh and bright and vibrant, this is it. It's also got a lovely spirity character to it as well. There is smoke in this, but it's really difficult to detect, especially for a dull palate like mine. But if you do wait until there's absolutely nothing or very little left in the glass, that's when the smoke lets itself known. And after you've finished the glass completely and the glass is dry, there's no liquid in it, cover it for a while and go back and poof, you get that puff of smoke. There is a wee bit in here. This is wonderful. It's part of Compass Box's core range now to join the Spice Tree. This is their Orchard House, and it's around £40 as well. It's delicious. And if we love flavour and if we love, that enjoyment of whiskey, that pleasure that it brings to us, this is a blended malt. But it's blended to do a very specific thing, where the spice trees are richer, spiced, more caramel, dark fudge type proposition. This is just all fruit and flowers and bright and breezy and alive and vibrant. And I think this is pretty young whiskey in this, but it's wonderful what's been done with it. I don't have enough space on my desk for everything. Fernando's saying, I totally love that bottle Spice Tree. Have 2 unopened, also the Oak Cross and 1 of the Peat Monster. Is the Oak Cross lower ABV? I think the Oak Cross here in the UK is 43%. I'm not sure. Not a fan not a fan at all in that Orchard House. Oh, says Daniel Vermaas. I think he probably likes a richer prospect. I like it a lot. Hellswood is saying that Orchard House and the Glasshouse Drams have been a fabulous choice and for a change from single malts. In order to bring more definition, I've got a few whiskies here that are a bit more difficult to define, let's say. You wouldn't call them undefinables, but there's something that they're blended, but they're not quite blended malts. And I want to talk about those, and you might find that I talk about one of those. Let's try and catch up with the chat. Jimmy Legg, good to see you, Jimmy. When it comes to blended malts, what percentage do you think are pointed at us? 25%? Most are low ABV rounded whiskies. No, oh my goodness, that'd be interesting, Jimmy. When I first got into whiskey, blended malts were really not a thing. Spice Tree was available. Compass Box was available when I first got into whiskey. I certainly remember Compass Box has always just kind of felt like it's been around. The hedonism is a grain, of course, blended grain. I remember that from early on. I remember some special releases of Compass Box. I vaguely am aware of the first ever Spice Tree that came out that was withdrawn from the market and things. But other than that, I really don't remember much. Remarkable Regional Malts from Douglas Lane wasn't about yet. It really wasn't a thing. And I didn't even really consider what the difference between a blended malt was and a blend back then. I don't really care too much, I don't think. But if you go onto one of the biggest UK retailers right now and just click on blended malt as a category, there's almost 150 options. The second biggest retailer has almost 100, and the third biggest retailer has about 60, 70. That's incredible choice. And as I was scrolling through them, there's so much I hadn't tried. Some of them were quite expensive. Honestly, some of them were quite expensive. There's the Collectivum 28, you might remember a Diageo special release from, I think, 2017 or 2018. I think 2017. That's still available 5 years later. It's £130 and it's an on-age statement. But it's interesting because the 28 comes from, it's got malt from all of Diageo's 28 malt producing distilleries. So I think that's quite an interesting thing. But I think it was priced too expensive. If they brought that out at 60 or 70 pounds, now, okay, it could be that that's just the price is the price. That's the cost of the whiskies that's in there. But with Diageo, it's all over the place. If they brought it out at a much keener price point, I think it would have been snapped up and enjoyed. But out of all of those, up to 150 blended malt choices, a lot of them were very, very interesting and very keenly priced, Jimmy, and presented for us. I think blended malts are, the majority of the releases are for us. There may be some blended malt stock out there that's out at 40% and 43%. I know that Berry Brothers do some at lower ABVs, I think, but the price tends to be quite low as well. The price is keen on these. The majority of the blended malts, in my opinion, are for us to just enjoy. I'm going to try and convince you of that tonight. No, that's not true. I'm going to try and convince me of that tonight. And Matt is saying, just looked at the Orchard House recipe. It's 29% Clynelish, so no wonder you like it. No doubt. And I think the other ones that's in there as well, Linkwood, Is it Deanston is the other one that's in there as well? I can't really remember now, Matt, but it's all fantastic whiskey to my mind. Whiskey Hog, Collective M28 is my favourite blend. Fantastic Whiskey Hog. You probably have tried that and decided that it's maybe worth that money too. I remember trying it and remember thinking it was fantastic. Did I think it was £130? Maybe need to spend a wee bit more time with it. I did buy an expensive blended malt for this vPub tonight, and that was in the consideration, but it's not the one I bought in the end. Tom Elmer is saying Compass Box Phenomenology. Phenomenology was a great Compass Box. Really pretty good, 46% ABV as well. Phenomenology, I think, was about £90 from memory. I'm not sure, but there was some really quite old stock in there. Terrific stuff. Let me show you a couple of difficult to defines, or things that are things that I maybe once considered were blended malts, but it turned out they were not. Things like Black Bottle. I don't have a Black Bottle on hand, but I once thought that that was a blended malt, but it's not. It's a blended Scotch whisky. So is this Compass Box. The Great King Street. We've got Glasgow blend, and I know this has gone through a rebranding recently. There's a much more up-to-date 70 CL version of this. This is a 50 CL old branding. And there's the Artist blend and the Glasgow blend. Those are not blended malts from Compass Box. Those are traditional Scotch, blended Scotches. So there's grain whiskey in there too. Another one, you can't buy this anymore. This is Bailey Nickel Jarvie. This is one of my favourite brandings, actually. Really old kind of Victorian 19th century, early 20th century branding on it. Really kind of tongue-in-cheek language on the bottle as well. This is long discontinued. Would I recommend this? Do not buy this. The price you'd have to pay for it now. It's a good blend, but it's not a blended malt. I used to think that this was blended malt, but it's just high malt content blend. High malt content means that there tends to be more malt in it than a typical cheap bottom shelf or average blend. There's a lot more malt whiskey in here, and it was famous for it. People really loved Bailey Nickel Jarvie, and they were sad when it disappeared. I kind of think it's good. I think it's a good blend, but I've got so many malt whiskies that are better. Anthony Dunn is celebrating being a Barfly member for 24 months. He's saying, hi, Roy. Was blended whiskey not the style in the 60s, 70s, balancing flavour for a more rounded bottle? I still love JW Green Label for a daily drinker. Single malts and cask strength have spoilt me. That's true, Anthony. Johnny Walker Green Label is a blended malt. It's not like the so many others of the Johnny Walker. It's not the only blended malt from Johnny Walker, but most of the Johnny Walker range tends to be blended Scotch whisky. And that's exactly what they were designed to do, Anthony, to be consistent, Not so much rounding out, but whatever flavour profile they were going to achieve, they were going to be able to do it time and time again. I'm just going to hold up this wee bottle. Very blown away by this gesture, Anthony. This is a very, very precious thing that you've sent me. It just came through the post, unannounced. Had to dig for the note. It was stuck in between the bubble pack and the envelope, but I found the note eventually. And Anthony, I think what I'm going to try and do with this, buddy, is I'm going to wait until you're in Scotland or until we're in the same space together. And I'll hopefully remember to have this in my pocket and we can drink this very, very special bottle of whiskey together. I'll show people what Anthony sent me, why I'm being so precious about it. Quite incredible. The generosity of this community never ceases to amaze me. Anthony Dunn's been a member of Barflies for 24 months. What that means is for the last 24 months, nobody's had to sit through ads in the vPubs because of Anthony and all the other Barflies that press that join button underneath, and they support me for $1.99 a month. $1.99 is dollars, pounds, euros, whatever it may be. It means that I never monetize the vPub. You don't need to sit through ads. And if you break it up podcast style afterwards, the ads don't pester you. Thank you all for your support. I hope you're enjoying all the wee emojis that you get a hold of too. Rob Halford is saying Johnny Walker Celebration blend is glorious. And I think the Celebration blend is also, remind me, Rob, I think is also a blended malt. Jimmy Legg is saying amazing that they'd put that out in a mini. I know, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's quite incredible. So yes, the kind of difficult to define ones. These are blends. These are examples of blends. But there were blends that once in my mind, I considered they might have been blended malts. It was way back at the start of my whiskey journey, if you like. Here we have one here as well. This is all malt. This is the Glasshouse Blend. It actually says blended Scotch whiskey on it. Now, everybody's been raving about this recently. You know, you can pick this up for anywhere between 26 and 32 pounds, somewhere of that order. It's very well priced. It's a non-age statement. But it's how good it tends to do in blind lineups and how good it tends to be as a sipper, despite the encouragement on the label for you to use it in a highball. This is 100% malt whiskey, but the reason that it's not a blended malt is that some of the malt whiskey in this has come from a continuous still. So it was 100% malted barley, but it went through a continuous still. Mixing the two of those together, that's counted as a grain whiskey. So mixing the two of them together, it can only be called blended Scotch whiskey. But interestingly, it's the sixth category that doesn't exist because the grain and the malt is both from the same distillery. It's both from Loch. So this is actually a single blend, So it's difficult to define, right? It's kind of pushing the envelope a wee bit there. And here's another one. And this is, came out at the end of last year. This is the Apogee from Bimber. This is where they've sourced Highland and Speyside, mature Highland and Speyside whiskey. But it looks like they've shipped it. I don't know the details behind this. It looks like they've shipped it in bulk down to London, and they've transferred it into Bimber casks, ex-Bimber casks. So mature malt Scotch whiskey has been put into casks that have previously held fairly young malt whiskey that's been made by Bimber. And these have been kind of finishing casks or additional maturation casks. I think it's only been about 1 or 2 years that's been in the Bimber casks. This is a tasty whiskey. It's a bit expensive. This was 60 odd pounds to get delivered to me. That is 12 years old. That's what that big Roman numeral 12 means on the front. It's labelled pure malt. You cannot, under Scotch whisky SWA regulations, you can't label it pure malt these days. It was once labelled as pure malt, but nowadays it has to be labelled as blended malt. But this is put together. This was bottled in England, so they can bypass the SWA regulations, it seems. This is difficult to define, isn't it? Is this English whiskey? No. It's Scotch whiskey finished in English whiskey casks, but it's from an English company. Is it Scotch whiskey? No. And you certainly can't call it Scotch whiskey. But it's closer to Scotch than it is to English because it's just how it's been finished and the geography of its maturation and its final finishing period. It's closer to Scotch, but you can't call it Scotch. So this is actually a blended malt Scotch whiskey. Actually, it's just that we can't call it that because it goes against SWA regs. So there's a few out there that are oddballs and difficult to define, but the rest of the things I'm going to focus on tonight are absolutely blended malt whiskies. So let's bring along one to show you. I'm not going to open this, so I've got 4 here, and I think 4 is too much to uncork tonight. But uncork 3, and this is the one I decided not to uncork. This is widely available everywhere. It's an entire range from Morris & Mackay, the old Perth series. Now, I think that this is much in the same way. I don't know how much of it they're blending themselves. I imagine that Morris & Mackay are much more set up to do that than North Star are. But I think a lot of it will probably be bought in as blended stock as well. They've got a non-age statement like this. They've got an original. They've got an age-stated one, and they've also got a cask strength one as well. This is the cask strength one. It's 58.6% ABV. It's non-age stated. All the other specs are in order. Non-chill filtered, no added colour, everything like that. Sherry forward, cask strength sherry bomb, £50. This is easy to enjoy whiskey. Very good. It's a wee bit sharp in places. So if you love sherry because you love the soft roundness of a lot of sherry cask, this is vibrant. This has got jagged edges on it. This has got quite communicative spices, let's say. I mean that in a positive way. This is a good whiskey to enjoy. And at the price point, you can play with it and have a bit of fun with it. This is a good one, but I'm not going to open that one this evening because the other 3 I'm really keen to open. There's actually 4. There's still 4. I need to work out what I'm actually going to open. Anyway, let's bring along the first one. and actually the second one, because both of these are going to get opened. I went to the Glasgow Whisky Festival a couple of weeks ago, and it was absolutely fabulous. I hope somebody out there is going to be going to the Limburg Festival at the end of April. I mentioned at the head of things tonight that I was heading out to Limburg to hang out with Doc McCallan-Fenner, who I can see is in. Chris Moore is going to be there from the UK. There's going to be lots of people from Europe. And we're just trying to work out who's going from the UK. It's definitely going ahead for the 23rd and 24th of April in Limburg. And this has been postponed from 2020 when it was going to be a really big event. I was going to be celebrating my 50th birthday, or part of it, there at Limburg in 2020. But obviously we know what happened there. So I've booked up. I've got a hotel booked. And we've got our tickets and the flights are booked and everything. So I'm really hoping that some of you guys are going to be going to Limburg this year and be able to meet some of you there. But I was at the Glasgow Whisky Festival a couple of weeks ago, and two of the whiskies I tried made me stop and think, oh, okay, we need to do this blended malt vPub. We need to do it because blended malts are not something to be ignored anymore. One of the ones I tried was MacNair's. I tried the 12-year-old, which is here, 46% ABV, and also tried their 10-year-old, which is a cask strength. And the MacNair's range is made by Billy Walker. So if you need any more of a kind of recommendation or a pedigree than that, we can't. I know that so many of you are fans of Billy Walker. But what he's done here, this is a peated whiskey, is he's taken malts from across Scotland, Highlands and Speyside. He's brought in some Islay in there. I would imagine it's likely to be a Kalila, but I'm not sure. And he's added it to Glenallachie. He's added it to his own spirit that he has there at Glenallachie, not potentially the spirit he's made, but Glenallachie spirit. And he's put together Limburg. Now it's been around for a little while now, but the range has been extended more recently. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive either. The 12-year-old was just under £50, and if you want the 10-year-old cask strength, it's over £50. In the end, I liked both of them. I went with the 12-year-old just for 2 years more maturity, and because I think I maybe preferred it just a notch. But this was at the festival, right? When you're trying all of these whiskies and you're happy and you're kind of dizzy with it all and just loving it. Is it going to be as good tonight? I'm not sure, but it's certainly one that's going to be opened. So we'll get it opened now and get it in a glass, shall we? All of these whiskies. So these two are very, very recent purchases based on my experience at the Glasgow Festival. Let's see if we can get it to pop. Not bad, not bad. So we'll pour just a wee measure. The peat's in check. It's not a smoke bomb. It's not a smoke bomb. It's much richer than I remember even. Nutty. Roasted nuts even. Wow. Roasted, just know, I'm going to put it to the side. I'll nose it later. Salted, roasted peanut, maybe even roasted caramel. Salted caramel. Fantastic. Nice nose to start with. It's a 12-year-old Limerick from Billy Walker. Are you heading to the Fife Whisky Festival this weekend at Roy and Barflies, Graham? No, unfortunately, we've got a postponed family trip down to see friends that we've not seen in a really, really long time. And that was kind of booked in for a long time, and we're going to go ahead with that. We weren't absolutely sure where we're going, so it was kind of 50-50, but I'm not going to be at the Fife Festival this time. It's a lovely festival. It's one of the best out there. It's one of the coziest and friendliest. You're just down the road as well from Louvian's bottle shop too, so knock yourself out in that fantastic wee place. And yes, I hope everybody that gets along enjoys it. Fantastic. Okay, no, what's that? That's my spice tree. It's a different dram. So that's my Limerick up there. And then this one. This is really interesting. Now, again, I tried this at the festival at the weekend and I thought, okay, this is a decent whiskey for the price point. Look at this. Screams Springbank at you, doesn't it? So a lot of people are going to know what this is. This is just out this week. Campbeltown Loch is not a new thing, but it's new as a blended malt. Campbeltown Loch has been a blend for years, typically 40% ABV, although they did have various age-stated and higher strength ABV versions over the years. It's changed now. They've moved to a blended malt. This is a blended malt now, and typical with Springbank's presentation, which this very much is. Anybody looking at this bottle would know immediately that this is a Springbank bottling, right? This is 46% ABV, natural colour, and non-chill filtered. And it's 40 quid. Now, it is a non-age statement. And I remember trying it at the Glasgow Whisky Festival and thinking it tasted pretty good. My recollection is it was a wee bit youthful, but it was bold and bright. And it had a lot of that lovely coastal brine and elements that we like to enjoy in our Campbeltown whiskies. So isn't it interesting? And the craziness that we saw, good pop, the craziness that we witnessed for the Springbank releases when they came out on the 1st of March, people sleeping outside. Now, okay, it was an exception this time because we knew there was a 10-year-old local barley coming out. We also knew there was a 25-year-old. So there's lots of these lucrative bottles, let's call them lucrative. So there was lots of people going a bit crazy to try and get their hands on that. I love drinking whiskey and I love whiskey. I would love to have a Springbank local barley. I can't afford a 25-year-old, but there's no way. I don't think there's any whiskey out there that I would sleep in a pavement for, to drink at least. But if I was in a position that it was an opportunity for me to make some money, can we really blame those people that do all of that work, that research, sleeping out in the pavement? I think the problem with all of this nonsense, there are people out there with more money than sense. They really don't know the value of anything, and they're happy to spend £200 and £300, £400 on a bottle that costs 50, 60, 80. It's nonsense. There are lots of people out there that really need to have a word with themselves, and it's the end buyer, I'm afraid, because not many of them are collectors that really need that bottle for the collection. It's mostly people with just loads of money, I think, and not a lot of sense. I'm sorry to be judgmental. Springbank 10 is also a peach aquavite, says Daniel Vermats. I agree with you. So young doesn't matter as long as it's good. I would say that my guess about this Campbeltown Loch, let's stick my nose in it and see how we go. Oh, this is smoky too. Again, not bold, not heavy smoke. But if I nose the spice tree again, not heavy smoke. This is more light, coastal, sea breeze, briny. It is malty. There is a cereal note here. Really very malty. Now, this is a blend of Springbank, Longrow, Hazelburn, Kilkerran or Glengyle, and Glen Scotia. So all of the brands that we know from Campbeltown exist in this Campbeltown Loch. It noses a wee bit young. It does nose a wee bit young. There is a fresh spirit from it. But there's not a lot of alcohol heat. 46% ABV. This is lighter than that Limburg. So I'm going to go in and try this one first. This is the one I was excited about. This is the one I wanted to make sure I got for this discussion tonight. Because if Springbank step into the mix, blended malts are getting sexy, right? There's a place for them. And when Springbank are struggling to keep up, if they can bring something out that can give people that Campbeltown experience while they can't get their age-stated Springbanks, Longrows, etc., surely that's something to explore. Let's have a wee sip. Cheers, everyone. This is much more similar, very dry on the finish, much more similar to the Gauldrons from Douglas Lane than I imagined it would be. The Gauldrons is the Campbeltown blended malt from Remarkable Regional Malts from Douglas Lane. This is younger. When I was at the festival that Saturday, when you're trying so many whiskies, it's your palate quickly becomes confused, saturated. Everything tastes amazing, right? There's even a wee bit of, I'll try it again before I say this. There's a lot of malt. There's a lot of grain. There's even a wee bit of salt and vinegar crisps. Salt and vinegar is something that Scott Monroe famously picks out of Colila. But there's a bit of salt and vinegar here. The saltiness you expect, the vinegar. It's just a wee bit tart, a wee bit acidic. Green apples, apple. Granny Smith, tart apples. The tartness, the acidic thing. So that's the fruit. Absolutely apple juice. Wee bit young. Clean. Remarkably clean for Campbeltown whiskey. There's a wee bit of kind of funk there, but not much. It's dialed right down. This is just a cleaner thing altogether. I think if you were into your Campbeltown whiskies for your kind of dark, heady, aromatic, funky Springbanks, Longrose, things like that, for your Victorianas from Glen Scotia, for your really heavily cask-led Kilkerrans, this is not going to be your thing. This is like Campbeltown's version of the Orchard House. Maybe not as fruity, but in terms of the cleanliness of it, the vibrance of it, that it's similar to that. And I think it's probably similar in age. Single-digit ages, maybe a wee bit of mature stock in there. I mean, it's nice, it's sippable. It's just a wee bit sharper than I expected. Again, put it down, leave it to air for a wee bit. It looks like, how many sips did I take? There must have been 3 or 4 at least. So I was enjoying it. I was curious. I was interested in it. Let's go over to the 12-year-old Limburg then from MacNair's. So it's a wee bit more expensive. You're going to pay about £8 or £9 more for the MacNair's, but it's got an age statement on it, 12 years old. More smoke. Still not a lot of smoke. We're not on Isla here, but we've certainly got a smoky element coming in here. But the smoke is more a savoury lick. This is rich. This is immediately telling you that this is rich. There's mature stock here. Not a lot of alcohol in the nose either. 46% ABV, the same as the Campbeltown Loch. It's got a much better nose, so fudge. And I know I've just had my nose in that Campbeltown Loch, but there's a salty thing here too. It's the salted caramel thing. I think I picked it up a wee bit earlier. The nuttiness. The smoke gives you a suggestion that it's kind of like almost like roasted smoked nuts. What's the fruit? What's the fruit in this? Maybe if I was forced to find fruit in this, you would maybe be in the realms of like a jam, cooked fruit, berries. Maybe there's a tiny hint of orange if you're actively thinking about it and going looking for it, but you're really forced that it's not obviously overtly citrusy. Let's have a wee sip. More peat on the palate than on the nose. You taste it. The finish is peaty. Slightly richer. That nuttiness continues. It's oaken now. There's an oak element here. So where the Campbeltown Loch has got malt forward, it's cereal forward. This is much more oaken. And it's resinous, but don't consider resinous as a texture. I mean resinous as in like a wood resin, sap. There's almost like a distant gunpowder, but don't think of that as sulfur. Think of it literally as gunpowder, like the caps that you used to. And maybe there is a bit of kind of cherry berry thing. Softer than you imagine. Maybe I should have gone with the 10-year-old cast strength. That was the one that I spent most time with at the festival. It was a cast strength one. But I bought this one because it's a wee bit cheaper and a couple of years more maturity on it. Maybe the cast strength would have had a lot more communication with it. This is much softer than you imagine, I think, but more flavoursome than the Campbeltown Loch. I don't know how many malts are in this. I don't know what makes this up. I just know it to be Highland, Speyside, Glenallachie, and some Isla. Neil Sungupta is in saying, how different do you find these blends compared to our beloved single malts? I'm telling you now, and I'm telling every one of you that's in here tonight, if anybody could pick either of these up and say, no, this is a blended malt, it's not a single malt, I would be shocked. I would be knocked on my backside. It would have to really, really depend what you were sipping them alongside. Is there anything about either of these that make me think blended malt? No. No. So you can't compare them, I think, Neil, to a single malt very easily. And now we've gone back to the Campbeltown Loch, and the peat's there now, the peated element to it on the finish. Smoke is on the finish for both of them, and it was much more pronounced the second time I went back to it there. So going from that richer Limburg onto the Campbeltown Loch brought a lot of that smoke on board. Let's try a wee bit. Let's recalibrate a wee bit with my spice tree here. I've still got lots of that in the glass. And I've got two empties here, and I have to decide of the three that I've got left what I'm going to pour. If you like the caps you'd throw on the ground, or the ones in the red ring that would go on a toy gun, exactly that kind of distant, not kind of in your face, spent or matchbox type thing, but like the smoke. Aye. It's difficult, isn't it, sometimes? Tom Scaramouche is saying, I'd give a special mention to Cadenhead's blend malts for their shops. We picked up the peated version, which is Coolila, Benahavin and Ardmore, cast strength for around £40, stunning. Cadenheads do a lot of that. Obviously, don't ignore Cadenhead's creations either. There's a lot of kind of fun things at Cadenheads, and if you go into their shops, absolutely, you can pick up that kind of stuff. Oops, I just hid Frank, I just accidentally clicked hide on your comment. Maybe somebody else took care of it. Maybe it wasn't me. I was just trying to scroll and I must have clicked the button. Sorry, buddy. If you were saying something there, please say it again. Oh, no, you did. It got it through. Jimmy Leg, I already got the feeling you're working, I think. Hence, I'm not stalking you with messages. If you're mentally done with work, hey, just let me know. Fantastic. What a fabulous flight. Bravo. Well, wait till you see what I've got coming up. These are ones that I've been thinking about for a long time. One of them's fairly recent, but the other one, I've pushed out and said, okay, I'm just going to get it now. I've tried it enough times to know that it's fantastic. It's going to be interesting to see how it stacks up tonight. But before I get to that, let me show you this. We used to be able to buy blended malts of a very, very good age for very, very reasonable money. When North Star Spirits started out, you remember they famously had their Vega series out there. And the first Vega, a 23-year-old and a 40-year-old and things, we were talking about a 23-year-old for about £50, maybe 45 if I remember well. And the 40-year-old Vega it was hovering around £100 for a 40-year-old malt whiskey. That's changed now, and the prices have obviously climbed as the reputation climbed, because we were quick to forget this was blended malt. If we had any snobbery about the B word, Vega was a wonderful lesson that taught us to shut up and enjoy the whiskey, especially when you could get it at a good price. But it's become more expensive these days. But there are still things out there that's good value. On paper, this is uncorked, this bottle. Let me ask you before I show you this, how much would you pay for a 23-year-old cask strength Glenfiddich? How much would that cost? It's difficult to even imagine, right? 23-year-old Glenfiddich at a really low ABV, 43% ABV, would already be probably a couple of £100. Cask strength, something a wee bit more exclusive, would be multiples more than that, I think, especially if it was a single cask, right? Single cask, 23-year-old Glenfiddich. What we have here is exactly that. This says Blended Malt Scotch Whisky, Wardhead, Secret Speyside. Now, this is interestingly the Calvados cask finish. They had a couple of options. There was a port finish. There was a standard one that was just called the Secret Speyside, and they had this one, which was Calvados finish. So maybe there's an apple element or something on top of the apple element that Glenfiddich can sometimes already have. But let's see how it pans out, because what I've got here is Wardhead is Glenfiddich single malt. Now, they say it's teaspooned. They say that it has a teaspoon in each cask, a teaspoon of Balvenie. I don't believe that. Maybe it gets teaspooned at the vatting stage or something. I really don't know. But this is a single cask that's supposedly teaspooned. I think it's a paperwork exercise. So I think they describe it as blended malt in order to protect their brand, and nobody can sell it as Glenfiddich single malt. But I think it's every bit Glenfiddich single malt. I think. Let me be clear, I think. Teaspooning is a practice that's employed in whiskey to do that very thing, to render a single malt a blended malt. And it stops independent bottlers or whoever it may be bottling it as the distillery brand. Third uncorking tonight. We're doing well, aren't we? Good pop. Oops. Okay, pour a wee bit in there. 23-year-old malt whiskey. So how would you ask? Stefan Novak is saying I would pay exactly €139.99. Perfect. Andrew Butler is saying I've got a 22-year-old Warhead and it was £112, including postage and packing. Well, I got this. I don't pay postage and packing. I've paid one of those Prime things. I got this for £119, I think. Maybe it was 129. Could be 129, but somewhere of that order. There's a chance that it's a bit of a gamble. This isn't something I tried at the festival. I've not had a sample from anyone. I've tried Wardheads in the past, and I've generally had a pretty good experience with them. Calvados cask was interesting to me as well. I don't know why they finished it, but it was probably one of those sister cask type things. We've got one here we'll leave plain. We've got one left we'll put in port, and we've got one here that we'll put in Calvados, and that gives us a nice little selection, some variety, a range. But I'm very curious about it. Now, these are uncorkings. I should really be putting this to the side, given its venerable age, and let it open up a bit. But we want first impressions here from the neck pour, don't we? Okay, apple. Thinking apple, looking for apple, finding apple. Let's try and dial it out a bit. There is age here, but it's quiet. This is an older whiskey, straight away on the nose. All the things that you're looking for there. So much more rounded, despite its very high ABV, not very high, or higher ABV, 51.5% ABV, which I believe to be cask strength. This is a single cask, and they've got the cask number on the bottle, 9891. But it's still fresh, despite that kind of age and that hint of maturity. Not quite dunnage, but there is something in there that tells you it's a bit older. So the apple element here is a ripe crushed apple or something, but it is appley. And it is a fresh smell. There's a nice floral element to this. It's outdoorsy, it's summery, clean. Apple, pear, it's orchard fruit. Some melon, maybe, some nice white melon. Let's have a wee. It's a wee bit of spice, but it's not loud bacon spices. It's kind of quiet, maybe like a peppery ginger thing. Let's have a wee sip. Lots of spice. Ginger, white pepper, a little bit of cinnamon maybe. But the thing that got me the arrival was the mouthfeel. Good body. Nice thick texture after the whiskies I've been sipping tonight. There's much more texture to this. Oily even. You would even suggest a wee bit of wax. But immediately the development goes straight away to spice. It's still going. This has got quite a long finish. Gums are tingling. It's a good whiskey. This is an interesting whiskey. Not everything is there. I think there's a slight sense of a hollowness. There's a slight sense of a gap. So it's not rich. It's not rounded. It's not full. Let's go back in again. Yes, this is the nicest whiskey so far by quite a long way. I'm not sure it's 120, 130 pounds worth. I think I've got a lot of nice malts over there that I've paid a lot less than that. That's could potentially go toe-to-toe with this and win. But this is quite unique. Maybe it's the Calvados thing. Maybe it's the fact that it's that aged 23-year-old Wardhead. But this is a nice whiskey. Everything about this is lime green. So I'm thinking lime green. I'm thinking light green white melon. I'm thinking pear. I'm thinking light green apples, but ripe, maybe like a golden delicious apple. There's a sweetness to it. There's a slight acidity to it. But it's that kind of color. So if you ever imagine colors when you taste whiskey, which I often do, this is lime green. There's a bitterness. Catch up with the chat. There is a good finish to this as well. A long finish. It's drying. The ABV is helping this a lot. Alistair Gray saying last year, Little Brown Dog, wee mongrel, yes, absolutely, had a 20-year-old for £45. It was a 50 cl, but lovely whiskey and great value. Yeah, a 20-year-old for £45. I mean, if you, I don't know what you would, if you brought that up to 70, you'd probably be speaking about 60, 62 pounds for a 70 cl, something of that order, maybe a wee bit more. Yes, good value for a 20-year-old whiskey, Alistair. I did not get the wee mongrel, but I was tempted by it. Falscraft is saying, from my experience, I find that it's easier to detect a bottler's signature like that of a traditional distillery rather than no single malt from Blended Malt. That makes a lot of sense, Falscraft. That makes a lot of sense. There is a signature about the way they warehouse things, the way they hold or handle the whiskey. The casks they use, I'm not sure what it is, but I know exactly what you mean. There was a period that I went through with the Whiskey Rev that I've lost. I can't do it anymore. Or maybe it's changed, I don't know. But the Whiskey Rev and I knew when we were pouring blind for each other, if we poured an SMWS, we could taste it. And we knew it was SMWS. It was an odd thing. Not every time, not all the time, but it had a signature that we could recognize. I've since lost that ability, or maybe the signature isn't there anymore, I'm not sure. And Tommy Elmer is asking me what the price would be if it was a 23-year-old Glenfiddich. I think it would be considerably more than the 120 odds I paid. I would guess somewhere in the orders of 2 to 3 times as much. And if it was single cask, maybe more, but then it would be brought out for a very different reason. It would be a select cask, and this is where we've got to be very careful. Where this Wardhead is kind of being available, if Glenfiddich was to bring out a single cask, it would be specifically selected, and there's quite a difference there. Andrew Butler is saying an OB Glenfiddich would cost twice as much, though, wouldn't it? Absolutely, Andrew. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, it may be that it would taste much nicer because of what I've just described, but it's wonderful that there are options out there for us where we can taste this kind of maturity. I think this would be nice to sit with a wee drop of water, put a couple of drops in it, let it sit, put a couple of drops more in it, let it sit. I think that it could bring more and more, tease more and more of that white fruit out, maybe even shade a wee bit into the tropical. Still an interesting whiskey, and I'm glad to have it. I think it's probably 75 quid's worth, 80 quid's worth. I hope that helps you a wee bit. But it's a neck pour. Believe me, that's just the first pour out the glass. I may come to enjoy that much, much more. And Ben Whiskey with Molly is saying, the Glenfiddich Grand Cru is 23 years old and available for £200. I can't remember the ABV of the Grand Cru, but I think it was 43% as well, Ben. By the way, that it was a delicious whiskey. I did taste that one, and I liked it a lot. Alice saying, Roy, I'm sipping on an 18-year-old Timorous Beastie Winter Edition, paid £65. Great value, lovely dram. Last time I bought that, I got it for 56, Al, and I think that it went on offer for 56 recently. But even if you're paying 65 quid for an 18-year-old Timorous Beastie, I agree with you. It's excellent value for money. I've got one more bottle to share with you tonight, but we've got a wee job we have to do first before then. I've told you about Limburg, but do you remember me showing, this is only, I'm not going to talk about Dramface, I promised you I wouldn't. But remember I said that I've got 2 brand new hats here. These have never been worn. These have still got the tags on, and it's the inside, everything. So the reason I've not worn them is because I'm going to give one away, and I want to give away the one that, you know, choose what color you want, whether you want blue or black, and I'll keep the other one. Remember, all you had to do was comment under the video. So we can pull that up right now and figure out who's going to get a hold of that. Let's pull up the screen share here. There we go. I hope you guys can see that. I'll crank up the view a wee bit here so that we can see the names a bit better. How many names have we got? We've got 46 names. Let's do a randomize. What's happened to the randomize thing? Why is there no randomize anymore? Has it changed? I think I get caught out with this before. A few more column actions. There it is, the randomize range. There we go. So that's it completely mixed up. Change that. So it's not got that bracket in it, not that it matters. And I'll ask my virtual assistant, hey Siri. She comes on when I don't want her to. Hey Siri. Hey Siri. Give me a random number between 1 and 46.
A random number between 1 and 46 is 32.
32. Martin Linder. Martin. There you go, my friend. I don't know if you're in tonight, buddy, but you commented on that video. If you would like to choose a blue or a black, I'll go into the comments and I'll say congratulations to you, Martin. And you can choose whether you want a blue or a black cap. Listen, I want to make note of something. There's a lot of people feeling themselves in a lot of displacement in the world right now. They didn't ask for it. It's just kind of been brought upon them. And I want to raise a glass for our friends over in Germany, because the hospitality that you're shown at that train station in Germany would bring tears. It's absolutely amazing. I just wish that our country would be in a position to step up and be able to do the same thing. But it's absolutely heartwarming to see what's happening over there in Berlin. I'm so impressed. But Jason Bradford in the Aquavitae Barflies page is doing a wee fundraiser for Ukrainian families, displaced families, refugees. He's doing squats all of the month of March, which I know is tricky for Jason, I think, and he's going to really throw himself into it and try and raise a bit of money. I was trying to get the link in order to share it, but it's a Facebook fundraiser. I've put in my donation today. Anybody that's Barflies, that's members of the Aquavitae Barflies page, just go into the Barflies page on Facebook, search for Jason, and you'll see his fundraiser there. He's trying to raise a modest £300 for this thing. I think we're Barflies and we're amazing. We're tremendous at raising funds for those things. Jason's a really active member, a generous member of the Barfly community, and this is a nice gesture. It's obviously touched him, what's happening out there in Eastern Europe right now as well. And if anybody wants to help, please head along there, and it would be nice if you could pitch in. I know that you're all probably doing other things, like we all are, to try and help that, trying to find everything that we can do to try and we hope that we can help a wee bit. But the folk in Berlin, they've shown us what it is to be better humans, I have to say. Quite amazing. Lunaran St. German and Austrian Caritas are also doing fundraisers, and they have structures there as well. Fantastic. Yeah, so, we're kind of watching this thing happening, and we just cannot believe that it's happening in 2022. There's some people that don't deserve any of our time at all, and there's people out there that deserve to be celebrated. Cheers, everyone. Yeah, nice one, Jason. Nice one, Jason Bradford. So there we go. Martin Linder has managed to bag our cap. And I've got one more bottle to open before we roll into our quiz tonight. I don't know what your feeling is on blended malts. I really don't know, but the more I sip, the more I enjoy, the more I not only think that they've got a place, but they've got a compelling place. And if you think that you somehow are being starved of something by not being able to taste a specific distillery character or something, you're right. And it's not going to be there for everyone. But some distilleries don't necessarily have that character to taste. And sometimes what we're really after in whiskey is just a really good flavour value proposition. And we like to have a distillery to hang our jacket on when we get that, don't we? We like to have the comfort of knowing where that's come from. Compass Box have been shown us for 20 odd years now that it doesn't need to be like that. And just like we enjoy very unique experiences from single malts, single casks, blends and grains and everything else in whiskey, different styles, blends and blended malts offer us something that can be really compelling. I think the biggest abused space in whiskey is blended whiskey. Blended Scotch could be really something spectacular, but we'll maybe get there. They definitely have a place, says Helen. Lots of them in our collection. Good for you. Fantastic. And I'm glad that you're enjoying them. Unicycle Master, that looks like a new name. Wonderful to welcome you in. Terrific stuff. I hope you're doing well. Here's the one that I've pontificated over, and I finally bought it and treated myself to it. I'm talking, and that screen share is still up. Such a noob, right? Have a look at this. Compass Box Flaming Heart. Now, this whiskey, it feels like it's been around forever. And I think it has. I think it's about 15 years old. We're on batch, well, I don't know what batch we're on, honestly. This is batch 6, but batch 6 has been available since 2018. And it's still available now. So it's obviously quite a sizable outturn. What struck me about this is that I have tried this in the past and know it to be very good, but I never ever bought any of it, and I can't tell you which version I tried. In the Oswas and the Only Scotch Whisky Awards last year, there were multiple people talking about Flaming Heart. So I was really surprised that it was still so widely available. So let's pull open this nice wax seal on the top. This is a pricey bottle. I think I paid £112 for this, 110, something of that order. It wasn't cheap. And I've been wanting to open this for a long time. Oops. Quiet pop, but the cork's okay. Let's give it another go when it doesn't have any glue still sticking to it. Yeah, that's much better. Oh my goodness. Well, it certainly smells nice. There we go. So this is, like I say, batch 6. I think it's been out for about 15 years. I think it's 46% ABV, I'm pretty sure it is. No, it's 48.9% ABV, so a wee bit higher than that. It tends to be made up of, typically the batch will be mostly Kalila, Clynelish, that kind of thing. This has got a significant chunk of Deanston in there too, some other distilleries, some other mixes. The great thing about Compass Box, you jump on their website and it'll tell you what the mix is. And if you want to even dive in a bit further, send them a direct email for a bit more information. And I believe that they still respond to your emails and tell you a wee bit more than what they publish on the website. It's quite expensive. It's a non-age statement, but like I've just explained, you can discover what the age of the components are. And Compass Box have proven over the years to be fair about that. If they've got an expensive release, it's because there's expensive rare whiskey in the blend. Let's have a wee nose of this. Let's see what all the hoo-ha was about from peers and people I respect who recommended that I pick this up. I'm in the Highlands. I'm in a lightly peated Highlander. A rich. We've got citrus here, ripe citrus, but it's quiet, it's in check. We've got some floral notes. We've got some dustiness, dried hay, that kind of dustiness. We've got cereal and dried fruit too. Think candied zest, candied citrus peel, and a wee bit of candied ginger. There's almost a sense of Christmas cake element. Cinnamon and nutmeg. Spice, baking spice. Not salty, but smoky. Aromatic smoke. Damp, aromatic smoke. This is rich. The nose on this is really good. Really interesting. Hold your attention. I'm sorry, I'm zoning out from the chat right now. Ah, good grief. I think there's a sherry element to this, but it's quiet, sweet, almost like just a whiff of PX dessert sherry. This is wonderful whiskey. You know that when you have just enough smoke to make it part of the it just adds savory. It adds a bit of depth, adds a bit of dimension to it, but it's not all of the prospect here. There is so much going on that you quickly forget about the smoke. This is the best whiskey I've had tonight. by a long way. It's a wee bit salty in the palate from that peated whiskey, I'm sure. The sweetness I got at the start is kind of, it's more kind of the spice that's coming in now. Spice. Nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger. Ginger is the thing here, but it's not fresh, sharp, tart ginger. It's candied ginger. It's a savoury thing. Some cooked fruit. There's a lot to unpack here. This is the best whiskey that we've had tonight. This has lived up to expectations. So where I'm ambivalent about this Wardhead here from Cooper's Choice, because of the price, you know, it's fantastic that we're able to buy a good value Glenfiddich, right? But it doesn't really live up to its price. 75 to 80 quid I pitched that. That makes sense. Does this live up to 110, 112, whatever I paid? Al is asking which edition it is. This is edition 6. This is 2018's edition 6. If I finish up tonight and if I do the chapters and mark everything and get the housekeeping done tonight, if I pour one more dram to take to the sofa before I climb off to bed tonight, this would be it. And the reason for that is not that it's just amazing, amazing, amazing whiskey. There's a lot going on here. And I think a good blended malt needs to be able to do that. It needs to be able to bring those things, those layers, that as a whiskey geek, as somebody that loves whiskey and flavour, can feel like they've got layers to peel away. And that's the sensation here. Flaming Heart is an appropriate name because there's a lot of spice and there's a good amount of smoke. I would even suggest that there's more smoke in this than all of the previous kind of semi-smoky ones, Limburg, Campbeltown, Loch, that we've had tonight. This is like a smoky spice tree with a nice dollop of something orangey, citrusy, gingery added into the mix. I've got a screenshot to share with you so that I can show you a wee bit more a bit later about what's involved in the mix in this. You know, some Compass Box releases are expensive. They are. And the price, you can look at the price and go, oh, and then you discover what's in it and you go, actually, that's a fair price. Think of No Name. Think of Phenomenology. Think of Tobias and the Angel and all of these. There's often been the 3-year-old deluxe. There's often been attempts at getting close to a really kind of Brora Highland style. And they've often got very, very delectably close for a fraction of the price of Brora. Obviously not the same age or vintage as Brora and not Brora, but very, very close in a contemporary way. This is not that. There's not enough age. There's not enough richness. There's not enough dunnage. There's not enough depth. There's not the kind of clay and earth and agriculture that you get in a Brora. But it's that profile. It's that style. This is not waxy either. Actually, it is a wee bit. Again, just by thinking and looking, you find it. It is a wee bit waxy too. That is a very busy whiskey. Not dense, not really tightly packed, not like we're not in Springbank or Edredale or Ben Nevis here, where this is layered. That's what this is. Best whiskey I've had tonight. Rob Halford is saying between 7 and 30-year-old whiskey in that bottle. Second guessing that price now, Aquavite, especially with the healthy amount of Deanston in there. Well, Rob Halford is a huge Deanston fan. Al, I got your question, didn't I? McAlfred Rare Doc is saying, speaking of Brora, they now offer a £300 GBP and a £600 GBP tour. I know that, Doc. I saw that. It's not for us, buddy. Those tours are aimed at the same people that is keeping the secondary market prices so buoyant. People that don't know or just have money that I guarantee you they have no idea what a carton of milk costs. Sorry if that sounds judgmental and things, but it's just an area I can't play in. Ben is saying, pop my Campbeltown Loch tonight, and lovely whiskey for the price. Glad you're enjoying it, Ben. I have to say I'm quite surprised because I was so excited about it. It could easily be the weakest tonight. And that doesn't mean to say I've not enjoyed it or I will not enjoy it. I think it's fantastic. We've got a Campbeltown whiskey. I've had a Blended Malt for the price point coming out of Campbeltown. It's got Springbank's name behind it as well. It's going to be good. And over the course of the next few days or whatever, I think I'm going to enjoy exploring it a wee bit more. But I think against the Limburg, which edged it out a bit, the Cooper's Choice, obviously, we're not comparing apples for apples anymore. And then the Compass Box. What else did I uncork tonight? No, I did. That's the 4 uncorked. So we've done okay. We've uncorked 4 bottles tonight. I really hope that it opens up this year and I can get more folk around here to help me enjoy this whiskey. It's not whiskey until it's shared, right? Roland is saying, do you know the Compass Box, the double single with single grain and single malt, Glenelgan? Very good, that one. Yes, I do. I never owned it, Roland, but I loved it. A few people here that don't know what a carton of milk costs, I bet. Well, I can tell you because I do the shopping often, but it depends what you call a carton. The cartons I buy are £1.19. There you go. Daniel Williams is saying, love the sulphur note in that Flaming Heart. Check the empty glass the next morning. Such a fabulous bottle. There's not a lot of sulphur in it tonight. But you know, I've got this the breakdown of this to say what's in it, and I don't think it tells you on it. Once again, we combine the rich, bold spiciness of malt whiskey aged in heavy toasted oak barrels with the evocative smoke of heavy peated Islay malt whiskey. The components are from a range of ages that provides depth and complexity. The combination yields a flavour profile like no other in Scotch whisky. Big, bold, hauntingly smoky, but with an alluring ethereal sweetness that calls you back to the glass. I'd say that's pretty accurate, if a bit whimsical. In the 2018 edition, we have reintroduced a subtle sherry cask influence that adds an additional layer of complexity and richness. This is a touch we have used for Flaming Heart only once before in the 2012 edition. While we nuance each edition of Flaming Heart, the signature style always remains the same. Okay, I'm kind of pleased with myself. I know I could have read that bottle beforehand, but I didn't. So that's I mean, you can easily, if anybody's going to sip this at home, can easily convince themselves of that kind of slight lick of sherryness in it, the spice, a wee bit of sweetness too. But I did suggest PX sherry, didn't I? But as Daniel says, maybe a wee spot of sulphuriness, savoury too. You can tell I've enjoyed that one. There's only one wee sip of it left. So there we go. Fantastic. I do want to say thanks to everybody for the amazing support of Dramface over the last couple of weeks. It has blown everybody away. We're kind of standing back and looking at the stats with mouth hanging open wide. So many of you have got so much out of that site and are feeding back to us such wonderful comments. Thank you so much. The new comment system is in place now. We've invested in that. It's looking much, much better. There's more upgrades and things to come in the future. Thank you all for your support. I know there's a huge overlap. There's a hell of a lot of you people, you folks here that have got a lot of benefits out of that and seem to be really happy with it. Danny Hebbington is saying a 4-pint carton here, £2 Aquavite. Fernando Roy is saying, is saying, Roy, it made me want to mix Spice Tree with Peat Monster with a few drops of Deanston Virgin Oak. Well, I get a wee bit. Do it in small scale, do it in a wee bottle, leave it for a while with some air in the bottle if you can, and leave it, walk away. Come back ages later and you might be surprised. Blair Stevenson saying, I volunteer to help with slimming down your bottle collection. We can make that happen, Blair. Absolutely. Fantastic stuff. So if anybody is interested in hanging out for the quiz at the end, there might be a few questions on theme tonight, but not all of them. I was wondering where to pitch it tonight. I feel like it's kind of somewhere between easy and not so easy, but I'll let you guys feedback to me. And Blair is saying, Dramface get blocked from my work network. Someone clearly spent too much time on there, and it genuinely wasn't me. Oh dear, Blair, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. We can do about that at our side, I'm afraid. And Peter Lee is saying, have I missed much? No, you never miss much, Peter. You certainly haven't missed anything, my friend, that you can't pick up on the replay. Good to see you in. Hope you're not too tired from your marathon shift. Just in time for the quiz, Peter. We all know the drill on the quiz. Please stay. Hang around if you enjoy the quiz. It's always just for fun. You might learn as much as you get wrong, and you're only playing against yourself. It's all multiple choice, of course. Let's swing into the quiz at the end. Pick it up here. Got a wee interesting picture that I want to show you here as well before we get started. Jimmy Legg is helping out. He's saying, Fernando's saying, oh, sorry, he's talking to Rob Halford. Everyone's saying, ahoy, malt mates, long day at work today. Everyone, I don't know if you got the message last week about your coin. Whiskey Roland Radar, who's in here tonight, has admitted to me that he's got one by mistake. I call it serendipity, and it should have gone to you instead. So there's a sniper coin coming your way, my friend. Good to see you, and everyone, I hope you're doing well. Have a look at this wee picture. I was really pleased to see this. This is from Israel. The guy standing up on the right-hand side there that you see is our Barfly Michael Haresh wearing his Barfly t-shirt. And on the left is the guy who's hosting that tasting that they're at. They've just been and did a tasting, and afterwards Michael held a quiz at the end of the tasting, and the guy who was presenting managed to win the quiz tonight. And isn't it good that his t-shirt, or the size of t-shirt that he would have picked, is the one that Michael gave away. Michael had two t-shirts because one got lost in shipping, and after I sent him a replacement one, the other one turned up. And I suggested that he keeps it and gets it in the hands of another Barfly. I thought it was a nice wee picture to share with everybody. Some folk enjoying some good whiskey time there. Stefan Novak is saying, my current home blend is Tomatin Legacy with a teaspoon of Manzanilla sherry. Shouldn't work, but it does. Ooh, I need to try that. And quiz time. Peter Lee is here for the quiz. I need to try that, Stefan. Sounds good. Are you going to Limburg? I think you are. Question 1, Burnside is what? Simple question. Burnside is what? Is Burnside A, a Speyside blended malt, B, a Lost Isla distillery, or C, a Highland coppersmith? What is Burnside? Jimmy Legacy and I see Reb. You know, I had a look at that, Jimmy, and I'm absolutely certain that is not Reb. I've got a picture of Reb. Reb's got a beard and things, but that isn't our Reb Mordecai. That's not Mordecai. So what are we looking at? Burnside is either a Speyside blended malt, a Lost Isla distillery, or a Highland coppersmith. I hope this is fairly easy. He's a guy off the bill, says Danny Hebington. I can tell you that Wardhead is Glenfiddich with a teaspoon of Balvenie, supposedly in the mix. Balvenie with a teaspoon of, for example, Glenfiddich is Burnside. So what it actually is a Speyside blended malt, on paper at least. Burnside is Balvenie's to Balvenie, what Wardhead is to Glenfiddich, is what I'm saying. Question 2. Fairy Flag was a release from Edradour after the 2015 film of the same name. What was it? Fairy Flag was a release from Edradour. Was it A, a single malt, B, a blended malt, or C, a blended scotch? What was Fairy Flag? I can tell you that it was a 15-year-old. Don't know if a 15 had anything to do with the fact it was 2015. I've never seen the movie Fairy Flag. I don't know anything about it. but it was a release from Edredar commemorating that movie. Was it A, a single malt, B, a blended malt, or C, a blended scotch? Oh dear, lots of people on the banana skin. Read the question. Read the question. If the question said, is it from Signatory Vintage? It could have been anything, I suppose. But if it's from Edredar, it can only be single malt. Edredar can't put their name on a blend or a blended malt. Famously, their second distillery that they built up there, they had the intention to call it Balechen after the single malt that they made at Edredar, but the SWA wouldn't let them call their second distillery that, so it just became Edredar 2, and it became the mirror distillery of Edredar. Question 3. In the 1950s, a step was taken to add fruit, and at that time a fashionable and sought-after likeness to Fettercairn. What was it? What did they do at Fettercairn in the 50s that forever changed the spirit character? A, they added stainless steel condensers. B, they added an inclined line arm. Or C, they added a cooling ring on the spirit still. This was in the 1950s. The step was taken to add fruit and fashionable, sought-after lightness to Fettercairn. What was it? Well, I've finished my, I've got a tiny sip left of my Flaming Heart. Absolutely, so many of you got this right. Stainless steel condensers would have much more likely have added extra weight and body. An inclined line arm would have added lightness, sure, but it was actually potentially added lightness, but it was actually a cooling ring, and this cooling ring goes around the top of the spirit still, and it lets water come down. It's collected at the bottom, and it's recycled back up to the top again. And this is a very, very unique thing that Fettercairn have that was actually added a long, long time ago in the 1950s, and it still exists to this day. Question 4. What is Wardhead whiskey, legally speaking? What is Wardhead whiskey? A, it's rebranded single malt. B, it's blended scotch from one distillery. Or C, it's blended malt whiskey. Stefan Novak is saying A. They did A as well, but not in the 50s. So that's Stefan talking about the stainless steel condensers. Yes, that's why specifically it was 1952, I think, Stefan, that the reading from the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, that the cooling ring went in. Knowledgeable gentleman. Absolutely everybody getting this right. I can't trip you up on the banana skin this time after the wee discussion that we had tonight. Clearly you know that on paper, legally speaking, whether it is or not, legally speaking, it's a blended malt whiskey. Absolutely. Wardhead is Glenfiddich with a teaspoon of another, usually Balvenie, I believe. Question 5 is always a picture question. This has got a barfly in the top left corner because I've nicked it from Tom Verbruggen's tours of Speyside Barfly. Tom is making his way around Speyside right now with some pals, and he shared a lot of pictures with these with the folks in the Aquaviti Barflies Facebook group. So I'm asking, what distillery are we looking at? A, Balvenie, B, Glenfiddich, or C, Ailsa Bay? All Grant's options there. Molasses Mike is saying, I'm glad I asked about Wardhead earlier. Good to see you in, Mike. I hope you're doing well. Ronald, Gabriel Welding, James DeGulio, superb. Is it DeGulio or Julio, James? I'm not sure. Good to see you regardless, Gabriel and Ronald too. Ryan Sutherland is saying Aquavita, I recognise that. Good for you. Hoyt Hemphill is in as well. Fantastic. Marku Makinen is in, catching so many of you. Graham Young, superb, superb. Your friend Gigino in as well. X2X Scotch is in too, fantastic. I can tell you that you're absolutely all spot on. You've clocked that as being Balvenie Still House. Interestingly, Jimmy Legg is saying, does Balvenie have 6 spirit stills? Well, you can see here that there's a plaque on the side of that still that says spirit still number 6. So if I go back to my best pal in whiskey, which is the Malt Whiskey Yearbook. I'll tell you exactly how many stills. The distillery is equipped with an 11.8 ton full lauter mash tun, 9 wooden and 5 steel washbacks, 5 wash stills and 6 spirit stills. So it's not balanced, but 5 wash, which are probably quite a bit bigger, and 6 spirit stills. Jimmy, so there you go, they do. Question 6, starting to get a wee bit crunchier maybe. Don't know how you're doing. Graham Young, Graham Fraser, Andrew Butler, and Sugar Kitty, Philip Wagner. Good to see Philip, Steve Atkins. Oh no, Steve's on 4, but the rest of them are on 5 out of 5. Question 6, which of these blended malts have this far not been reviewed on Dramface? Sorry, but it looks like question 6 has become a bit of a Dramface focused question in the last 3 weeks. A, Orchard House has not been reviewed on Dramface. B, Glencoe 8-year-old has not been reviewed on Dramface. Or C, Apogee 12-year-old has not been reviewed on Dramface. A, Orchard House, B, Glencoe, C, Apogee. I'm getting very burpy when I drink whiskey now. It's terrible when you're broadcasting live and you get the whiskey burps. Best thing to do is just go and have a big clear out. But I can't really do that on air, right? Apologies. James DeGulio is saying 2 out of 5 catching up. A lot of you are guessing. I can tell you that Apogee from Bimber was reviewed this week. Nothing to do with this week's vPub topic. I'm not involved in the scheduling of the reviews whatsoever. That's the editor that does that, who was on last week, Jason. But Apogee was this week and Orchard House was this week too. I think Orchard House might have even been today. Glencoe 8-year-old B has not thus far been reviewed on Dramface. I have had B, thanks Aquavite. You're welcome, Jimmy. You're welcome. 7. What are the significant components of Compass Box Flaming Heart 6th edition 2018? That's the one that I've just enjoyed with you. I did share it. I hope you were listening. Is it A, Kalila, Clynelish and Binrennis? B, Kalila, Clynelish and Linkwood? Or C, Kalila, Clynelish and Deanston? Rob Halford might have pitched in and helped everybody with this one. Sugar Kitty on a 6, as well as Ben Whiskey with Molly. Doc is saying the best of the 3. Dogs have no uncles. Good to see you, Colin. Good to see you here, my friend. Papa Q. C. Fordell. That looks like a new name, C. Fordell. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well in the quiz. Too Slow. Rob is here. Rule. Orange is Orange Rule as well. Fantastic. Sid Martin, Ian Bowes, Glenn Anderson, James Morgan. So many names that I miss. You were listening. Most of you were listening earlier. Absolutely. The majority of the makeup here, you can see this wee chart I've shared with everybody. In this big section down the bottom here, to the bottom right, is Kalila. To the kind of 7 o'clock through to 9 o'clock is Clynelish. And then from 9 o'clock through to just after midnight is Deanston. But there will be some Clynelish in the makeup as well of the other two, the kind of malt blends that they've added into the mix there. And if you send Compass Box a wee email, I think they're very, very open. Philip Wagner's enjoying a 7 out of 7 is Jerry Miller, Too Slow, Rob, Sugar Kitty, Gabriel Weldon, and Whiskey Radar. Well done, everyone. Question 8, see if you can keep it up. Which of these is actually a blended malt scotch? Which of these is actually a blended malt scotch? A, Abomination from Lost Spirits. B, Nika from the Barrel. Or C, Serendipity from Ardbeg. Which of those is actually a blended malt scotch? Rob Halford saying it's Spice Tree is blended in too. I think it's the Spice Tree Extravaganza that they used in the mix there. Looking at that chart, you probably can't see the text. It's quite small. Extravaganza was a special edition of the Spice Tree. It looks like they've added in as well. The parcel they've kept back for that. So much Kalila in the world, says Jimmy Legg. Thank goodness. Can you imagine if there wasn't, Jimmy? Can you imagine the price of other peated Islas if there wasn't Kalila? Jimmy Legg and Jimmy Jazz, both with their pink Barflies. Congratulations, guys, and thank you. Most of you got this absolutely spot on. Abomination from Lost Spirits is malt whiskey from Scotland that has been rapidly aged in the US. Nika from the Barrel is mostly from Yoichi and Miyagikyo, I believe. And Serendipity is a mix of 14-year-old Glenmurray and 23-year-old Ardbeg, released about 12 or so, maybe more years ago, 12 years ago, I think. Apparently a mistake, and you'd have to think it would be a mistake mixing a 23-year-old Ardbeg with a cask of Glenmurray 14 or vice versa. But they released it as a blended malt. They didn't put Ardbeg on the label, but it was from them. Serendipity. Question 9. A range of blended malt Scotch whiskies has been released called Sweet, Rich and Smoky. From which Edinburgh bottler? Not particularly original names, but they've all come out at the exact same time. This is a brand new brand, harking back or reviving a brand from the past. So I want to know which brand, Edinburgh brand, has brought out these blended malts for us all to enjoy. Is it A, J and G Thompson, B, Krabby's, or C, Port of Leith? Graham Fraser is saying asshat incoming. You're absolutely right, Graham. Chris Pollack is on 8 out of 8, along with Graham. Ryan Sutherland, Peter Lee. Peter Lee, 8 out of 8, stunning. Good stuff. Gabriel Wilding on 8, Sugar Kitty on 8, Stefan Novak on 8, Whiskey Radar on 8. I'm looking for Graham Fraser. Lassie Hort Oatsman, good to see you in, my friend. 8. Whiskey with Molly Ben on 8 as well. Ben, terrific stuff. Andrew Butler on 8. So all the A students scoring really well tonight on this one. Everybody thinking that it's J&G Thompson, and you're absolutely spot on. It was J&G Thompson, and I think it's an extension of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society there. Most of it's 46% ABV. Nice, pretty bottles. Non-age statement. It's all a wee bit pricey for non-age statement. It's about £50 or thereabouts. I've not tried any of it yet, hoping it's quite good whiskey. But it's yet again part of this kind of blended malt zeitgeist. This idea that they can bring along this really quite nicely presented, tasty malts and get single malt money for them. So it's going to be interesting if they can stand up to their single malt equivalents at the price point and presentation. I hope that that's the case. Oh, lots of people on 9. Whiskey Radar Roland, Gabriel Wilding, Graham Fraser, Sugar Kitty, Stefan Novak, Graham Young. Oh my goodness. Is the asshat going to be the thing to make me a swear word over the weekend? Let's go and have a wee look. Yes, there is an asshat. There is an asshat at the end tonight. Jerry Miller is saying asshat will now ruin my 10 out of 10. Jerry, let's hold tight. Don't be negative. Be positive. Okay, you've got a 1 in 3 chance, even if you're purely guessing. And I think that you might be guessing tonight. The asshat tonight is, of the top 30 best-selling whiskies globally, how many are Indian whiskies? Even if you knew that. Is it the same as the number of Scotch malt distilleries that A, begin with S, or B, are owned by Pernod Ricard, or C, with worm tubs? Of the top 30 best-selling whiskies globally, how many are Indian whiskies? That is, that they probably can't be sold in Europe or the UK because they don't conform to what we know whiskey to be. They're made from things other than what we specify whiskey is allowed to be made from, but regardless, they do very well in India, and they sell fantastically well in India and outside of India too. How many are there? Is it the same as the number of Scotch malt whisky distilleries beginning with S? Is it B, the same as the number of distilleries owned by Pernod Ricard? Or C, the same as the number of Scotch malt distilleries with worm tubs? Jerry Miller is saying B. So B, he's committed and he's thinking owns by. Bimo is saying A for asshat. Spot on, Bimo. Pedro Menezes is in. That's a true asshat question. It is. It's an asshat in every way. But I hope that you at least learn something out of it. I can tell you there are 13 of the top 30 that are Indian whiskies. Almost half are Indian whiskies. Quite incredible. And 4 out of the top 5, the only thing to break the top 5 is Johnny Walker. 4 out of the top 5 are Indian. Distilleries beginning with S. There are only 7 distilleries active in Scotland beginning with S right now. Distilleries with worm tubs, there are 19. but there are 13 distilleries owned by Pernod Ricard. So yes, I think, Jerry Miller, I think that you'll be whooping and celebrating that you did not trip up on the ass hat tonight. I hope that you did manage to, I think I saw you say that it was B. Jerry Miller, yes, 10 out of 10. Fantastic, Jerry. Congratulations to you, Ben. Whiskey with Molly, oh, your beauty, 10 out of 10. A genuine 10 out of 10 bagging. Fantastic. Graham Fraser, 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Superb. It's great to see the emojis. It's much easier for me to see. Penny in the slate. Oh, penny in the slot. Sorry. 9 out of 10. Damn you, ass hat. Still my best result so far. Terrific stuff. Apologies for the ass hat, but it's still a tremendous result. Captain Bamus. Bamus. Captain. I'm just going to call you Captain now. That is, until I know how to pronounce the second part, my friend. 5 out of 10. My first pass mark. Congratulations to you. Ass hatted again, says Gabriel Wilding. Only managing a 9. Sorry about that. James DeGulio is celebrating on a 7. Fantastic. Too slow. Rob got a 9. Lassie got a 9. Congrats to all the 10, says Molasses. I agree, Mike. Well done to everybody that managed a 10. Terrific stuff. Who have I missed? That got a 10 tonight? Whiskey with Molly. Ben. Still celebrating. Rob Halford is saying this is a surprise. He's just realised that there's a Dramface emoji as well. Great stuff. Really great stuff. Terrific. I hope you enjoyed that. Good wee bit of fun tonight. Lots of 10 out of 10s. It's wonderful to see. For a long time there, getting close on a year where we're struggling, where we're maybe only getting the occasional spotty kind of 10. So it's kind of nice if we can bring it back, if we can still have interesting things and interesting questions that we can learn interesting things from, like that about the Indian whiskey, but have the ability to have people celebrating 10 out of 10. Peter Lee is saying Aquaviti. I got a 10 here as well. Congratulations to you, Peter. Great stuff. I think, did Graham Fraser get his 10 as well? I'm not sure. What am I going to do to raise a glass to you at the end of the night? Strap in. You know what I'm going to do. There we go. That's the MacNairs. Here goes the Campbeltown Loch. Here goes our tiny wee spot that I left of the terrific Flaming Hat, and also what I've got left of my spice tree. Now, what do we have in the glass? What do we have? What have I made? My own blended malt. And it's going to be just as delicious. So this is what I'm going to drink as I sit and do the chapter markers after I close the stream tonight. And I hope all of you kind of have moved a wee bit closer towards being at least open to tasting a blended malt and considering it from the perspective of its flavour rather than its provenance. There's the best whiskey I've tasted tonight. That could be. The Flaming Heart was very, very good. Jimmy Legg has bought me a Dram U Star. That's the only dram I've had tonight. Jimmy, thank you very, very much, my friend. I can't let a night go by without Roy telling you how much we appreciate the vPub. Thanks, Roy. Jimmy, you are a superstar, my friend. Thank you so much for your kindness. Thank you for your support. Thank you for just being here. I dread the vPub where Jimmy Legg can't make it. I dread it. Too Slow is celebrating his pink barfly. Thanks, everybody. Aquaviti. Thanks to you, Rob, as well. Too Slow. 2 years as an Aquaviti barfly supporter too. Tonight wasn't supposed to be Blended Malts. It was supposed to be next week. But I've switched it around because Ben is a wee bit poorly. Whiskey Geek Ben. And to the topic that was supposed to be tonight was natural versus not. It's a blind tasting thing. And I may involve other people. I had the idea that it would maybe just be Ben and I, but I may involve a couple others in as well, because this idea that, okay, we're whiskey geeks and we really love to talk about natural. What if we take natural and put it next to something that's really close, but it's not natural? Are we able to tell, is one better than the other? How's it going to end up? And do it brutally blind, me blind as well. Of course, I'll know what the whiskies are. I always do. That's the downside. But I'll still sip along blind and see how the folk get on. But Ben was poorly, so we had to switch it around. I hope that, Ben, you're getting on a wee bit better and you're going to be in better shape for next week, because I'd love to hang out with you again. And Ben's palate is becoming the stuff of legend. If anybody that's witnessed Ben's capability on the vPub before, I've witnessed it in real life too, as has a few other guys out there, Ben, Whiskey with Molly, Sevy, Scott, Fraser Thistle, people like that. They've noticed his capabilities as well. It'd be nice to have him on to talk about that. So that's what's happening next week. Thank you, Aquavites, says Fernando. Pleasure to share with all the community. I agree with you. That's tremendous sentiment. Doc is still here. A late one for you tonight, Doc. Thanks very much for hanging around till the end. Thanks for the great evening, Roy. Have a great weekend, says Gino Kumo. Thank you, Gino. What brother Ray's. Thank you, Roy, for this blending session. Thank you very much, Ray. It's wonderful to have you in, buddy. Whiskey with Molly, Ben, love that topic, fascinating. And Philip Wagner is saying thanks a lot for the Ben, I think you're just celebrating your 10 out of 10, buddy. Thanks for the vPub. Did very much enjoy tonight's topic. Philip, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support, buddy. Graham Young is saying always a highlight of the week. Roy, love the chat with these great friends. I do too, Graham. Thank you too, buddy. It's wonderful to have you in always. I'm going to wrap things up now. All that's left for me to do is raise a wee glass and say that I'm looking forward to hanging out with you, hopefully, if he's in good shape, with Ben next week. The week after that is St. Patrick's, so I'm going to have to try and weave something in that's not just kind of, oh, it's St. Patrick's, let's drink some Irish whiskey. It would be nice to actually celebrate it, right? It'd be nice to actually celebrate the things that's happening in Ireland and talk a wee bit about Irish whiskey and see if we can't get some people involved who would like to talk about that as well. A wee drama in from Daniel Williams right at the end as well. Thank you, my friend. He's posted a wee thumbs up sticker as well, Daniel. Thanks to you. Thanks to Jimmy Legg, and thanks to Graham Young, and one in from Al as well. Thanks again, Roy, as always. Al, thank you, my friend. Thank you all so much. This is tasty, honestly. Just mix your whiskies, play with your whiskies. You don't need to mix them all. You don't need to ruin them all. Just enjoy mixing it up. And Anthony Dunn as well. As if you haven't given me enough, buddy, you've given me a wee dram as well. Lovely vPub, Roy. May have picked up a compass box from Master of Malt to try that Flaming Heart. Have a lovely weekend on the vPub tonight. I hope you love it when it arrives, buddy. I hope you really enjoy it too. So I'll raise this wee glass to say thank you for hanging out with me on another Thursday night. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. I hope it's been half as much of the pleasure for you guys. I look forward to hanging out with you again a week from now. Until then, Sláinte mhath.